For the most part this offseason, the Bulls have done well. Not saying they've completely knocked it out of the park and turned this team around, but within the confines of what they had to work with in remaining below the luxury tax, having little options by way of trade assets, limited cap flexibility to bring in big-name free agents, they made some solid moves that actually address areas of need. But there are a couple of particular areas, or transactions really, that have me scratching my head a bit. And I can't help but think that these might have been opportunities that were missed that they could very well regret down the line. And it's what we'll be talking about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, as you know from a few days ago, after the Bulls were pretty quiet when it came to any moves over the last couple of weeks, the Bulls re-signed Dosunmu to a deal worth $21 million over 3 years. And they signed Onrolat Bitim to the final two-way contract. The Bitim signing came first, and then just hours later, the Ayo news was announced. Now, on the surface, I don't have a problem with these transactions. I mentioned how I don't know much about Bitim, but based on what I've seen, what he offers by way of shooting, decent playmaker, is solid finishing at the rim, brings a lot of energy. I think it's a solid pickup to take a chance on an international prospect for a two-way deal. It is just a two-way deal after all. And then for Ayo, I mean, while yes, you can call the extension a bit of an overpay at 3 years, $21 million, which I'll talk about why I consider it an overpay. At the same time though, Ayo is young. I still believe with a proper development and improvement, he can actually be a solid rotational player in the NBA. And if Ayo in his sophomore season was just an isolated incident and he picks up where he left off in his rookie year or gets even better, then that $7 million a year becomes a bargain, especially over time with the salary cap increasing. But here is where I think the Bulls made a mistake. And it could end up being nothing because we're talking about a fringe rotational player here, but it could very well end up being more down the line depending on how this guy shows up as he enters his prime, and that's the Bulls letting Javon Freeman-Liberty go. Not even giving him a two-way deal. The way he dominated in the Summer League, the fact that he played incredibly well in the G League season last year, and again, I like Bitim, and maybe I don't have enough knowledge, context, or history behind his play, but based on what I've seen, for right now, Freeman-Liberty has more promise. I've been much more impressed with his play than someone like Bitim. Now, it's likely neither of these guys really amounts to much in the NBA. They're both on two-way deals for a reason, but if I'm looking at a guy that has potential of being one of those two-way contract success stories like an Alex Caruso or Max Strus or Spencer Dinwiddie, two players the Bulls, by the way, had and then they let go, I see more of that potential coming from Javon Freeman-Liberty over any of the Bulls' other three two-way players. More so than Sanogo, more so than Justin Lewis. Now, the Bulls need size. They already have too many guards as it is, so I get it from that standpoint, and that maybe adding another guard isn't the best idea. But then they ended up adding Bitim, who was primarily a two-guard. And then, what gets me the most, when the Bulls signed Bitim to the final two-way spot, I actually thought this meant they were giving Freeman-Liberty a full-time roster spot. This was before they re-signed Ayo, of course, but 3 open roster spots. You assumed one was going to go to Ayo. Carlik Jones' contract wasn't fully guaranteed, and while I like Jones, he balled out in the G League, but he's not an NBA-level player. Just too small, not quick enough off the dribble, shoots well, but not against NBA defenses. There was no doubt in my mind that they were going to waive Jones and sign Freeman-Liberty to a minimum deal. But then, of course, we got the word a few hours later that he signed a two-way contract with the Toronto Raptors. Now, we don't know all the ins and outs of what went down. It's very possible Freeman-Liberty simply wanted to go to the Raptors more so than the other team. Maybe he gets more of an opportunity with the Raptors after Van Vliet's departure. We don't know. But I can tell you that no player is going to turn down a full-time roster spot for a two-way deal, no matter the circumstance. So I know some have been saying, well, maybe the Bulls did offer him a roster spot, but he wanted to go to the Raptors instead because the Bulls have so many guards, and he likely would have just sat on the bench. No. Guys who have been fighting to get into the league don't turn down NBA money for a full-time spot that is going to be worth significantly more than a two-way deal. It just doesn't happen. So it's baffling to me that the Bulls chose Carlik Jones over Freeman-Liberty. Because if you're going to go with this whole they're two-guard heavy narrative, Jones is less versatile than Freeman-Liberty is as it relates to his size and scoring ability as a guard. If you're going to keep a guard like Jones, you might as well just go with Freeman-Liberty. That said, we shouldn't lose our minds over this. We're talking about an end-of-the-bench roster spot that isn't going to make a difference in the Bulls season, but I think what's giving Bulls fans a bit of heartburn here is that we've seen the Bulls screw up 2 instances of 2 contracts of players who ended up becoming solid NBA players that we certainly could have used over the years in Spencer Dinwiddie and Max Strus. And the last thing you want to see is that happen again with Freeman-Liberty. Now, as it relates to Ayo's contract, So I put out a quick reaction video to that when it was announced, and now that I've had some time to mull it over and process it a bit, and while I've changed my tune on it slightly, for the most part, my stance on it is still the same. Look, the contract might end up becoming more favorable over time. $7 million a year is nothing if Ayo can continue to get better, especially if he improves his offensive game, more specifically his shooting. It's well below the mid-level exception. You have him locked in now for 3 years until he's 26 and he's entering his prime. So from that standpoint, it's a great deal if Ayo can shake off the sophomore slump and get better. My biggest hangup though is, was there really a team out there that was going to offer Ayo anything close to that kind of money? And maybe there was, we obviously don't know, and it's possible the Bulls were seeing another team as a threat and they had to sweeten the pot by offering him a longer term deal. But I have a hard time seeing that being the case when most teams, their rosters were already set, or they had little in the way of cap space and exceptions outside of adding players on minimum deals. And while yes, Ayo is young, solid defender, has two-way potential, his shot, at least last season, was broken, and not a lot of teams are going to be willing to throw him big money at a guard who can't shoot in today's NBA. So even the Bulls' qualifying offer of $5.2 million, which would have been a one-year deal, I honestly thought was going to be the best Ayo could get, because there wasn't going to be money and a market out there to offer Ayo more than $5 million a year. So for the Bulls, I mean, look, I'm fine with the deal. It's not awful, because Ayo can grow into that contract. It's small enough that it doesn't impact your books that much anyway, and it's also a very tradable contract at that amount. And I also get it. It's good for business to take care of your players. The new front office is trying to establish a new culture and tear down that old one that was always viewed as cheap and stingy with little loyalty to any of their players. But I just don't think this one was necessary. Not when you factor in the market for Ayo as well as the money that was available around the league, with cap space all being but dried up for most teams. But hopefully, Ayo balls out this upcoming season and proves everyone wrong, where now his contract is considered one of the biggest bargain deals out there. But at this point in time, yeah, I think it was an overpay. And between that extension as well as the Bulls letting Javon Freeman-Liberty go, after the way he showed up in Summer League and potentially being another case of Spencer Dinwiddie or Max Strus, yeah, this is where I think the Bulls made their first misstep this offseason. We'd love to hear what you guys think though. What were your thoughts on the Ayo signing as well as letting Freeman-Liberty walk? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.